be willing to pay for good counsel. And that's going to seem a little self-serving because I'm a business coach, right? But also, as you know, it applies in law, right? It definitely applies in accounting as well. And I see this with business owners I work with now, but then also I used to see it when I owned my own business, and we'd be consulting on a recruiting project, and probably even back to my accounting days, where a new business owner will look what they can afford. They'll decide what they can afford, and then they'll go settle for the service that fits that budget. And really, if you want to grow your business the right way, what you need to do is figure out what you need and then figure out how to afford that.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Mark Goldman. And Mark grew up working at his dad's accounting firm during high school and college. And so naturally went in and got an accounting degree in college and worked for an accounting firm for a period of time for a few years. Changed and moved over, or wanted to change, and so moved over to do more recruiting within recruiting accountants. Did that for a number of years, and then started his own recruiting firm and did that for a good period of time before selling that off and starting his coaching business, which is what he does now. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Mark.
Thank you. You told the whole story. I'm done.
Absolutely. We can just wrap up early and go home. But no, so I took a much longer journey and condensed it in the 30 or 45-second version of it. But why don't we rewind and unpack a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started with your dad's or working for your dad's accounting firm as you were growing up.
Sure, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and yeah, I'll fill in a few details along the way. Actually, believe it or not, I'm going to start with middle school, because when I was in middle school, basically where my father's career is he was a CPA. He had already worked in public accounting. He had worked in industry, and he decided that he wanted to start his own business. And so I started out in middle school as slave labor. I joke, he needed help, and I think he wanted to teach me about the business as well. So he did pay me. I mean, I joke about that. He did fire me like 6 times, and I came back 7. So that worked out. So it wasn't smooth all the way, but through middle school worked for him, through high school worked for him, through college worked for him. And really, it was a blessing, because I was learning stuff at work before I ever got to it in college in accounting. I literally remember getting up early from my Principles of Accounting 1 class, the one where you learn about debits and credits and T accounts and all the basics, so that I could accompany one of our clients to go to the bank to help them get a line of credit and answer any questions about the financials that we had prepared. And so I was sort of, set up well from that standpoint with my father. Got out of college, passed the CPA exam, consequently, the first time, because of all that, that pre-experience. I wasn't so sharp. It's just been ingrained, for so many years in me. So that worked out really well. And then, as you said, I got the itch to leave my father's accounting practice and, see the bigger world. I wanted to get married at the time, wanted to make more money as well. And so I went out looking for a job. Ended up doing some contract work. Absolutely hated it. It was the most boring job I'd ever had.
What kind of contract work was it? Just because, you go out there and you say, oh, anything's got to be, and I don't know that anything, it's not like it was a bad situation, but hey, I want to try something new, and whatever that is, that will be exciting and different. And yet not all opportunities are created equal. So kind of as you're going through that, what was the contract work that you started out doing?
Sure, no problem. It paid rather well, and I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but it was the financial crisis before the last financial crisis. It was the savings and loans failures. I had gotten a job basically working on a contract where we were doing the accounting for closed down savings and loans. And I honestly, as I remember it, it was the same two journal entries over and over and over and over. And it was so boring. And so I went to a recruiter. They'd approached me, are you looking for something new? I went in to talk to them, and they said, you know what? We're looking for a young, cheap CPA that might want to be a recruiter. I'm pretty sure they weren't that direct about it, but it seemed that way. And I was fully qualified. I met all three qualifications. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. And not going to lie, the first year and a half was painful. It was extremely difficult because recruiting is much different than accounting. It's very sales oriented. I had to learn that the hard way, but I survived. I made it, and stuck with that firm for 4 years. Ended up moving up, getting promoted a couple times. That worked out well. And then I was sort of dissatisfied. Wanted to move because of some internal management changes. And some friends of mine had started their own recruiting firm back in San Antonio. And so I moved back to town. This long story. I moved out and moved back to town to join them. And they were very gracious and offered me a minority equity interest in the business. And so I continued to learn the business, continued to make contacts through that. That partnership ran its course. I was there 6 years, and frankly, probably didn't appreciate what I had, how good I had it, but wanted to get out and feeling a little burnout. Got out of the business for 3 years, and then 3 years after that, in January of 2007, I started MGR Personnel, which later became MGR Accounting Recruiters, which is the company that you were referring to.
So now, how did you, in one sense, it makes sense. You've been in that industry, you kind of know it well, and it gives the opportunity to leverage some of those skills. But what made you decide, okay, I've tried a few things. I started working for an accountant firm for a period of time and did a couple iterations of that, did recruiting for others. And when you went, or, decided to go out on your own and do that, was it, hey, I like recruiting, or that was naturally that, or, hey, this is where my background or my experience is, or kind of how did you decide what you were going to do as you decide to go out on your own?
Sure. I always had the entrepreneurial bug a little bit, and you're catching on to that. Really, at that point in my career, I felt like I had achieved some success in accounting recruiting. I felt like I knew a lot of the right people, to continue to work in that business. And I had been through, two firms at that point, two recruiting firms, and this was probably my ego talking, but I saw some things that I would do differently. And so I just had the burning desire to prove to myself that I could start and run a recruiting company and do it my way. And really, that's what it comes down to. And it's a little sad to admit now. It was very ego driven, but I mean, obviously the end result ended up working out. So I'm glad that I'm glad that that happened back then.
So now you say, okay, I'm gonna start the recruiting firm, I'm gonna go out on my own, or scratch that entrepreneurial itch, so to speak, and go down that route. Now, how did you go about, was it one where, given your years of experience and working other people, that you're kind of able to hit the ground running, or was it one where you had to start from the ground up and start over and figure out how to get everything set up, or kind of walk through a little bit as you decided to go out on your own, how you got things set up?
Sure. No, that's a great question. Two things. First of all, you're going to see this through some of my story, or throughout the whole story. Really, is I was blessed with some good advisors, good counsel, and I think that's very important. One of my friends who had his own accounting firm, actually, I had shared with him that, hey, I'm thinking about going out on my own and doing this, and he gave me the advice, well, before you go and quit your job, cold turkey, and have no income, why don't you call some people and just make sure that they're willing to be clients? And as basic as that sounds, that really was a key part, because 2 months before quitting my job, I was making several calls and just making sure, frankly, that people remembered me, that they would take the call, and that if I started the company, that they would in fact, do business with us. And I talked to 5 people. He had suggested 5. I talked to 5, and actually 4 of the 5 said yes, and even the 5th said, "Well, I'll do business with you if I can, but honestly, I don't see we're going to have the need, but yeah, I will." So I got some good advice to do that, and that way I had a starting point. Honestly, when I didn't do any business before officially starting, like I didn't edge into it part-time or anything, but I did prime the pump.
Well, sounds like priming the pump, figuring it out, and having that, doing a bit of due diligence, so to speak, of figuring out, is it something that's viable? Is it something that you're going to be able to get people to buy into, or otherwise going to be able to hit the ground running? Was a great way to get things set up and kicked off for you. So now you found that, and or give us kind of an idea, over what period of time or how long did that business go for before, because eventually you sold it or made an exit, but kind of walk us through a little bit of how you built and grew that, and then what led to the exit.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So I had the business in total for a little over 15 years. It started out as MGR Personnel, and there's a naming lesson in there. I learned the hard way that a lot of the public can't spell personnel accurately, interestingly enough. So be careful when you're naming your company. We got a lot of email issues and stuff like that. But I started the company as MGR Personnel, and my thought was that I would start doing accounting placement, and then that would lead me into other areas like IT, HR placement, administrative placement. That was sort of the plan. I say that because it ended up being a bad plan, honestly. We grew initially, and the first, 2007, 2008, even 2009, we had several good years. Well, they were all good years, growing and doing well. But that plan of working on multiple areas really ended up being a distraction. Actually, I'm jumping ahead a little bit there in the story, but we won some fastest growing company awards, during that time. But ultimately it was falling apart because I could run the accounting placement area well, but when I tried to hire for the other areas, I just didn't give them enough attention. And so that started falling apart. I never really got good traction in the other areas. I had started using a coach. That person helped me with a lot of management issues. That sort of ran its course. I ended up meeting another business coach, and that business coach I worked with for, probably 7 years. Her name was Alicia, or is Alicia. And she's the individual to convince me that, you know what, you just need to drop all these distractions and go 100% accounting placement. And that's what we did. Eventually, we changed the name to MGR Accounting Recruiters. We totally bought the farm on accounting placement. We only did stuff if it was related to accounting, and it gave us a lot of clarity. I'm sure you understand the niche, value, and so that's what I experienced during that time. That worked out really, really well.
Awesome. So now you did that, for a period of 15 years or so, and learned the kind of where to focus along the way, and kind of what to do and what not to do, and are expanded and growing. Now, as you were kind of getting towards the end of the 15 years, at some point you made a sell or an exit. For before we jump into what or where you went after that, kind of what prompted that change in course or deciding to make the exit? Was it again wanting or bored with things and wanting to do something else, or hey, had a good opportunity that come up that you couldn't pass up, or was hey, timing was right? Or kind of walk us through a little bit of that.
Sure. Yeah. So after we decided to go 100% accounting, things actually started to click. So that was an important lesson I learned, is the value of niche. And then the second was culture. We also changed how we did internal hiring. We started hiring more for culture and less about whether or not the person had ever worked in the industry. We figured we could teach them a lot of the basics, we could teach them a lot of the finer points if they had a few of the basics. And that just got things started clicking. 2012 to 13, 14. I mean, we just continue growing and continue growing. being successful. And then COVID hit. When COVID hit, I had a great team. Honestly, they were all working extremely well together. Business was running very smoothly. And then March 2020 comes. And I was one of the holdouts. I did not want to close the physical office or send people home to work. In fact, I remember taking a picture in my dark office in front of the logo just because it was a very sad moment, that I was going to be leaving the office. But we did go home and go virtual, and that gets to the point of your question. That really was one of the reasons I decided to exit. 2020, we, like a lot of organizations, had a really long hiccup there in business, but it did eventually come back. 2021 was very fruitful as well. Things were going very well. My team was doing extremely well working from home, but two things had happened in my life. One thing was that although I enjoyed being at home, I didn't enjoy working from home because it took a lot of the joy out of my daily work, because the joy was coming from working with my team members, and I missed working with them in person. And then secondly, my wife and I had decided to adopt a second child. And so at that point, we had a 16-year-old and we adopted a 1-year-old. And so I'm working at home. I'm a father again, of a small child. And I just decided, you know what, it's maybe time to change the speed of things. As fortune would have it, mid 2021, the opportunity came to join the alternative board as a facilitator. That's the peer-to-peer advisory group I mentioned earlier. I do that part-time now. It was about a 20-hour-a-month commitment, and my team was doing so well, it was something I could easily do. I could easily fit into my schedule at the time. And so I started doing that and enjoying it, and not enjoying the other so much. And then I ended up at an exit planning event. We were sponsors, actually, believe it or not. I was not there to learn about exit. We were sponsors, and I'm walking out with a good friend of mine that does business valuations, excuse me. And honestly, I just couldn't resist the opportunity. I said, Steve, would you help me out and run some numbers and tell me what it might be worth? And so he said, yes, I do think you have something that's worth something. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And that started the ball rolling.
Start that ball rolling and just kind of walk us through over what period of time did you end up making that decision, or or leading to that exit. Kind of once you decided, okay, maybe there is something here, maybe it's time for a change, and maybe with life and some of the demands, it's a good period to change. Walk us through a bit of that process as to how you end up making the exit.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So I'm 51 at the time, and another key part of this is that I had a financial planner that I had been in probably more communication than she cared for, more frequent communication than she cared for with. And we started running the numbers on the business, and she's telling me, well, actually, you aren't in a position to retire fully, but you could just start working part-time, if this works out. And so that was the other key determining factor. So the guy gives me the numbers, and the next question is, do you want me to set you up with a broker? I know several. And so, sure, let's do that. So I got set up with a broker at the end of 2021. We listed the business in January of 2021. They were telling me on average that it would take 9 to 10 months to sell the business. And on one hand, it's like, oh, it's less than a year, no big deal. On the other hand, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a long time to live in limbo. It ended up selling in 4. I was very fortunate. We had many offers, frankly, and the offers were wide ranging. It's very interesting. That's a topic for a whole nother show, but not just in amount, but in the commitment that was required of me and how things would be structured. To give you an idea, I mean, it was everything from they need me for 3 months to 5 years. I mean, we had offers all over the place. But I was fortunate to to attract the attention of an organization called Team Shares. Team Shares takes entrepreneur-owned organizations and turns them into employee-owned organizations. And so I was able to sell to that organization and exit late 2022 in entirety to what I do now, just business coaching.
So now, how did you decide to get in, or so you make that exit? Now, the next step was you got into business coaching. How did you go about deciding that was kind of what you wanted to put the focus on, or kind of that was the next phase in the journey? What led to that?
I had used business coaches since I think year number 2 with MGR. I had my first coach a year and a half. I had another one for about 7 years. And then in the middle of that, I joined the alternative board as a member. So once a month, I was meeting with 8 to 10, depending on the year we're talking about, 8 to 10 other business owners discussing our issues and then having one-on-one consultation with the facilitator. And I was a member for 10 years before having the opportunity to join as a facilitator and basically be the person that's doing the consulting and getting paid for it. Honestly, that's sort of nice as well. And still having the experience of helping people, with their issues. I found that I really enjoyed trying to help people through some of what I had already been through and all the tough business decisions, along the way. I enjoyed that type of interaction. It was what I did in recruiting, but on a wider scale. And so really enjoyed that. Today, that's still most of my business coaching. I do take some clients on the side, if you will, just individual clients that are more in startup mode. But most of mine is done through the alternative board, and that's how I got into it.
Awesome. So now you've been doing that for, you say, a little over a year and a half or so?
Let's see, mid 2021. So I'm about to, 2.5 years actually at this point. It's hard to believe it's been that long, honestly.
Well, time always flies, and it sounds like it'll be it's been a great journey so far. So now, if you were to kind of say, okay, or been in it for a little bit of time now and made some of that transition, now looking kind of the next 6 to 12 months out, kind of where do you see things headed, or what's that next step for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I am still feeling that out a little bit. So for instance, today I dropped my son off at school. I'll be picking him up later after this recording from school, and I'm really enjoying that. And so I want to make sure I don't build a machine that takes up so much of my time or mental energy. Frankly, I'm being very careful and only building something part-time. So, next 6 months, probably taking on a few more coaching clients. But outside of that, I'm not, at this point in my life, I don't see becoming full-time involved in anything, at least for the near term.
Well, it sounds like it's been a good place, kind of hit the right balance, gives the opportunity to work with who you want and when you want to work with them. So or certainly presents a great way to go forward. So, well, now as we've reached the kind of the present day of your journey, and even looking ahead a little bit as to where things might be headed, great time to transition to the 2 questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
Yeah, just as with most guests, and I appreciate that you let us know about that question in advance. And, I had a lot of thought around this. And as with most of your guests, I'm sure we make a lot of mistakes along the way. It's like, which one was biggest? When I think about the mistakes I made, really, they all come down to, in some manner, I took my eye off the ball. And what I mean by that is, when you're fortunate enough or work hard enough to find the goose that lays the golden egg, and you're seeing some success, you have to remember that goose needs to be fed and taken care of. It's very easy to get distracted. There are times that later in my business journey, towards the I'd say the last 3 or 4 years there, where I had delegated a lot, And frankly, sometimes I probably delegated too fast because I was I was distracted by the next shiny object or something. But the biggest example of that was in the third or fourth year of our business really took a downturn, and a couple things were happening. Number one, the economy was tough. We were starting to feel the effects of the 2008 financial crisis. It hits employment later, and so it was like 2009, 2010. We were starting to really feel the effects on our business. And then secondly, and this is embarrassing, but I wrote a book about it, so I throw it out there. I had started to enjoy the perks that come along with owning a business and being out there in the business community in terms of business galas and mixers and happy hours and all this kind of stuff. And frankly, it was not good for my alcohol consumption. I let that get a little out of hand, and it started to affect the business at that time. The right answer for me was to give up alcohol totally cold turkey. And for anybody that wants to hear more about that, I did write a book and released that just last year called What Really Happened When I Quit Drinking. But that really feeds into my biggest business mistake is I started to take the business for granted, a few times. And that can be dangerous because, if you don't keep doing the work that got you there, you won't continue to be there.
No, I think that, that is one, and it's hard, you hit on one of them, which I think is a lot of times delegation versus new shiny objects versus, sometimes that's a great thing. And, if your business is not, you're growing, to the old adage is dying. In other words, you always want to be innovating, you want to be working on new things and figuring out how to continue to service others and reach new customers and all that. And yet by the same token, if you kind of get over your skis and now you're going too quickly or going in too many directions or not focusing enough on what the core business is, it can have that adverse effect. So definitely can get how that occurs, but also a great mistake to learn from.
Thank you.
Second question now that I'd like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
This one's easy. Be willing to pay for good counsel. And that's going to seem a little self-serving because I'm a business coach, right? But also, as you know, it applies in law, right? It definitely applies in accounting as well. And I see this with business owners I work with now, but then also I used to see it when I owned my own business, and we'd be consulting on a recruiting project, and probably even back to my accounting days, where a new business owner will look what they can afford. They'll decide what they can afford, and then they'll go settle for the service that fits that budget. And really, if you want to grow your business the right way, what you need to do is figure out what you need and then figure out how to afford that. You don't want to figure out, okay, I can afford to pay $100 for this legal service, so let me go find the cheapest attorney possible to do it for $100, or accountant, or what the case may be. You need to figure out really what you need and then how to afford that. In my own business, that ended up, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I remember the first year realizing that, hey, if I'm going to scale this thing, if I'm going to be hiring employees, I need a robust email service and robust file server. And back then, this was before the cloud. So that meant buying a bunch of equipment, $10,000 worth that I didn't have, so, okay, well, I need to go find out how to make an extra $10,000. And luckily I was able to, but really it applies to anything. You really do get what you pay for, particularly in the professional services area.
Yeah, I definitely would agree on that. And it is hard because if you don't have the money, you don't have the money, and yet, cutting the corners or getting people that really aren't going to provide the value you need in order to grow the business. Almost to your point is, it's better to delay or hold off, or otherwise wait until you are able to get those people that can help you and invest in the right people, and it makes a big difference in the success of what you get for what you pay for. So I think that's a great piece of advice and great takeaway. Well, now as we wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Probably the complicated way is my website. It's 4610ent.com, like 4610enterprises.com. However, the easiest way is LinkedIn. If you just look for Mark Goldman in San Antonio, I'll pop right up.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again, Mark, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you the listeners who are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Mark, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.